by 98 we probably had gotten to Italy, Germany, France, and we were starting to get to Eastern European countries like Czech Republic and Budapest. And it was burgeoning, it was growing. In Czech Republic, we were one of the early ska bands to play there. We had these young promoters, Premol and Kuba, who were like teenagers when we started. I was working with teenage kids, but they really had the mojo, they had the vibe, and we started building and building to the point where we played for 10,000 people in Prague. So, there was even a bootleg tape of us from the 007 Club that was going around the city for a while, unbeknownst to me, until a few years later.
All right, Praha. New York Ska-Jazz in the house, reggae steady. Shake that thing, those hips. Woo!
Really fun to be on the ground floor in some of these places, especially as you get east. The fact that you're from New York and from so far away, they haven't seen a lot of bands and people from there, so they really reacted to our energy. We're coming in somewhat aggressively, and they love that stuff. At this point, we had hooked up with Vin and Shay at World Beat, and they started managing the band. They came up with the idea that we could do a tour with Laurel Aitken and do like a co-headlining tour with him. We did this national with Laurel, and it was just, it was great. We did a co-headlining thing with him where we played our own set, and then we brought him out and we backed him up on his songs. Laurel was known as the godfather of ska, seminal figure, one of the pioneers of ska. He's, has Cuban and Jamaican roots, and, made famous certain songs like Sally Brown, which is like a ska classic. We used to play Sahara with him. He did the song Mo Whiskey. I think he's the composer. We recorded that song on Low Blow, I believe it is. And it was really fun to get to work with him. He was like the old original Rude Boys. So when we did the touring in the States and in Europe, it brought out a lot of those kind of fans.
It was a lot of fun to tour with Laurel. He's a living legend and all that, and getting to do that. So we basically did our set first as an opener, and then we'd take a short break and then bring him out, and he would do his set. And did a lot of his classics, and then also a lot of other people's classics from that time.
Something else when you're backing a Jamaican singer and there's going to be an audience there, whether they know who I am or not. We were really excited for the amount of attention we were going to get as a backing band.
He also figured out quickly that we were really quick on the draw on reacting to what was going on stage, and so he was doing the 5446 and / Train to Skaville thing, and so he started out the Give It To Me one time, and we'd do one hit, and 2 times, and at some point he realized that he could call out any number and we would do it. And so it'd be like, Give It To Me 17 times, and we'd do pop, 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 all the way up to 17 and hit right back into the groove. So he kept trying to see if he could mess with us, and one time he said, Give It To Me, not this time. And then we didn't, I think we just didn't do anything.
I was noticing that it depended on, maybe it's kind of arrogant for us to think this, but it depended on the sophistication of the audience, whether or not they liked us. You know what I mean? Because we had the shit, and if they didn't like it, it's because they didn't get it, But that's our arrogance talking. But I will say that the cities that have more of a jazz tradition, for sure, they enjoyed it. There were people there were listeners in the audience, people checking out stuff.
Now, at that point, we said that we were working with Shay, and he got us the Bob Marley Reggae Festival around that period of time. and that was in California. We did 2 stadium gigs, our first stadium gig ever, which was pretty incredible. We played for 10,000 people and 7,000 people, I think it was, LA and San Diego, and we were playing with, big artists at that point, like Sister Carol and Pateau Bonton. That was also with Laurel. The funny thing, people would say, don't you get nervous playing in front of big stadium crowds? And what was interesting was, like, after we did the first one, we were really comfortable doing the second one. So it's just a matter of whatever your perspective is. I do remember being on that stage with Carrie Brown, and we were all kind of in awe of the fact that, like, where we had started and where we got to. At this point in '98, the writing was on the wall for me. The Ska-Jazz was well received in the States, in Europe, and I was just unable to continue with the Toasters at that point, and I kind of had made the decision that this was going to become my full-time focus.
That was when we finally decided to strike out more and make this band more of a priority. It was like around the '97. I think when we booked that tour that had the North Sea Festival, that was kind of, we basically took a leave of absence and it never went back, essentially. We left the Toasters and started, focusing on Ska-Jazz and the European tour, touring in a more mature audience, and right around '98 the whole scene imploded. We've made the move at the right time, I think, because things definitely took a turn for the worse in terms of the mainstream ska scene, but what we had going on was sort of impervious to that, I think.
The Ska-Jazz is kind of responsible for me taking myself a little more seriously and having more confidence in working as sort of more of an independent musician. And because of a certain, I got exposed to a certain level of professionality that made it a little more difficult to stay with the hometown band. And that probably precipitated my leaving the Ska Plugs in '95.
I've had members of the Ska-Jazz move on, and it's difficult when it's going on, but I've remained in really good terms with Bucket, and he's been a supporter of the NYSJE from the beginning. He's been helping me, and Toasters are still going strong, and he still hooks me up with booking agent connections and gigs, so I'm happy that we've bridged that.
It wasn't even like we officially resigned. It was more like, we're going to be, out for 2.5 months doing these 2 tours, the European and the Laurel Aitken tour. And basically, when we came off of that, then, we'd been replaced, essentially. And which was kind of what we expected and planned on anyway. So it wasn't like there was ever any big confrontation.
The band had evolved to the point where it really was a band and everyone felt a part of it, everyone wanted to contribute. This was the last record with the original lineup intact. We all had written on the previous records. There was sort of like a track record as to it was like a template of how to go about the record.
The writing process was the same for all records. We all brought submissions. I was grateful to have one song on a record, I thought that was kind of them, because records are real estate for a musician. 10 tracks on a CD, you're talking about like plots of land to somebody who's a composer, So I was always very grateful to get my little plot of land, a place to plan a song, and
I remember sometimes I'd even make a cassette, like when we went out on the road, I'd make a cassette of a bunch of different ideas. It's like, hey guys, why don't we think about this, in terms of the cover songs anyway.
Rehearsals might just be reading through all the candidates, And as far as choosing which ones were, it always felt like a democracy, like we all knew it, well, in a room what was working. Between 2 of my songs, one would be just caught on perfectly in that, so it wasn't like a vote or something, it was very organic, it happened very naturally.
The one thing I like about this record, about Get This, is that every one of the 6 band members has at least one song on there. It was, finally we got the contributions from Jonathan and from Devin,
I think everybody obviously wanted to be represented. Again, we had diverse personalities, diverse writing styles, so it made it more interesting, I think, for the record.
We tried a lot of stuff to see what would stick. I remember I even brought in an Ornette Coleman song, and we decided it wasn't going to work, but we tried it out, and just trying some ideas that were in the vein of what we've done before, but also some ideas that were different, and see where it went. And one thing that I think distinguishes this album from the predecessors is the number of vocals on it. That we only had, this started out as it was going to be an instrumental band, and the first record is all instrumentals except the one. And so for the second, we thought, well, let's do a couple more. And so for then the third, we wound up, I think, almost half of the tracks have some kind of vocals on them in one way or another.
We decided to stay at Studio 900 and work with Joe Johnson. We had a certain kind of continuity with him. He's a great engineer. We were comfortable in the room. When you're doing these live recordings, you have to have everybody wearing headphones, being able to see each other, playing live, and then you're just, continuing takes and just keep playing until you get one that you like. So you got to be nice and comfortable in the room. And for me, Studio 900 was a nice room. We were used to it. I didn't have to go looking for another studio. We liked the quality of the sound. Joe was a very easygoing guy with good ideas. We still were on the analog tip where we were still using 2-inch tape because we liked the sound. We thought the sound was warm.
I think the analog medium is definitely a better medium and more conducive to recording something like the Ska-Jazz. Not only because of the sound, because tape has a certain sound, and it sounds like our favorite records, because our favorite records from the 60s on up until the 90s were made on tape. And it's a particular sound. And now I think digital is a more correct sound. I think tape is a subjective sound, but it is, subjectively speaking, the sound we like, and it's an easy way to have create a certain context with the music that you're trying to identify with. So you've got ska and jazz; these were two musics that their heyday were during the tape's heyday, and there was no such thing as digital recording. There wasn't a choice. It just so happens that these recordings are now analog, and that's how we know them.
We missed the larger space, I think, from Waterfront that we had before. 900 was definitely a little tighter, and so we wound up, I think, a lot of the horn stuff was done post overdub.
The difference in size between the two studios was pretty remarkable. I mean, Waterfront was just a huge recording space, and the tallest ceilings, with everything acoustically treated, really, really special room. In a sense, it was so big that it was easy to get isolation from one instrument to the next, because everyone could be playing in their own corner, and it wasn't too much bleed or any stuff like that. Whereas in 900, the recording room is smaller, but more compartmentalized and easier to isolate things. It wasn't so, it's what was nice about Studio 900 is that there was such a great setup with the line of sight between the control room and the two separate recording rooms, that you had sight lines no matter where you looked. You really felt like you were in one large open space, and it was easy to keep the visual cues, amongst a lot of people,
The mechanics at that point, it was our third record already, so we had kind of worked out how we do this stuff. We play live with the rhythm section. We take pretty much everything that we can and we fix up, probably some of the horn stuff. But the main focus is that the bass and drums are really intact. We were, and I still do, base, the takes on building it from the bottom. So you want to make sure the bass and drums are together, then you're adding, the keyboards and the guitar and the horns on top live. If you happen to get it, great, and if not, you overdub it. The reality of it is that what happens more times than not is that we take the takes with the horns in it, because it always feels better to play live with the band. And for some reason, the overdubs just don't feel as connected to the groove and to the center of the music. We do 2 or 3 full band sessions and then come back and do the overdubs with the horns, percussion, singers, trumpet, whatever little extra sort of ornamentation we wanted to add. Okay, this song, we are still playing it. It's just a perfect combination of the ska and the jazz. It's got a really nice rhythm section hits at the beginning, and the horns go against it, so it works really well for the instrumentation of the band. Usually play this second in the set. It's nice after the warm-up because it's a little hyped, easy to blow on because it's basically a blues. It's got the nice shout chorus underneath the piano solo, and the shout chorus itself is some really nice jazz lines, bebop-ish lines that work really well over the ska.
Filthy McNasty, I brought that in. That's always been one of my favorite Horace Silver tunes, and so we worked that up. That's pretty much a straight lift from their original recording. A few years later, I was teaching history of jazz at Hunter College, and doing the hard bop era. I played the Horace Silver version, and the next class, one of the students came up and said, "I knew I'd heard that song somewhere before," and he held up a copy of Get This, and it's like, it was kind of cool.
The beauty of getting to do all these records were that we could just keep exploring the fabric of jazz and ska, and we wanted to cover as many important figures as possible. I had seen Horace Silver live. Always loved his compositions because they always had like that bluesy, funky thing. I like music that I feel in a more visceral way, more something that's going to make me dance or feel the groove or the vibe, and it seems like a lot of his compositions have that.
Of course, is one of the great hard bop composers / pianists. Song for My Father is, of course, his best known piece, and that everyone plays when they're learning to play jazz generally. And he came up, played with Miles Davis. He's in that famous Great Day in Harlem photo shoot with all the musicians on the stoop of the brownstone, and he was still quite young at that point. And he and Art Blakey started a group together called the Jazz Messengers, which was sort of one of the first hard bop groups, and Blakey continued that. Horace split off to do his own quintet and churned out a string of really great albums from the late 50s into the 60s. This one is from Live at the Village Gate.
We loved what Kaz had done on the previous record. This was a way to kind of get the funk in and have a nice dance tune.
I remember picking out 4 or 5 different songs with female vocals that we could try out with Kaz, and the cut came down ultimately. I think the one that we chose was the Seesaw, the Steve Cropper tune that Aretha had done.
That's the beauty of having your own project. You get to record and play what you like and what you think is cool. If it works, let's put it in, and it was just another way to sort of stretch the genre. It's like, okay, let's add some old school funk in here. And it works over the ska. That's the beauty of the ska beat. It's so malleable and open to different interpretations. And of course, when you play this kind of stuff live, people are going to dance. So then you win.
Steve Cropper is a guitarist, songwriter, producer. He was in the house band at Stax Records in Memphis in the 60s as part of the Booker T and the MGs. He also appears as himself in the Blues Brothers, along with Duck Dunn, who was the bassist in that group. Booker T and the MGs was, sort of the quintessential Southern soul rhythm section, and the fact that it was an integrated group at the time, in Memphis in the 60s was a big thing. Steve and Duck Dunn were both white guys, but Booker T. Jones, the organist and leader, and Al Jackson, the drummer, were black, and they were behind scores of hits by, Sam and Dave, and Wilson Pickett, and Aretha, and lots of other people, just this who's who of soul. Arachnid, that was one of Freddie's patented ska ravers. Those are always big crowd favorites.
This song has always been interesting because I wrote, again, like this hyper fast tempo, and there was always the question of, at the beginning, how to meld the rhythm section and the horns, because a lot of the things that I'm writing, this one goes do ba 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 da da da, which is kind of a bebop line, but when you play it really fast, you kind of have to play it straight. So there was always this notion with this one, you know, how do you get the ska and the jazz to actually work together? Because if the horns are playing swing style and the rhythm section's playing straight up, straight up ska, is it going to work? Is it going to come together? And what eventually we kind of concluded, because we play this one now still, and it's great, is that the rhythm section kind of cannot listen to the horns too much, because when horns play bebop, they tend to play a little bit behind. But the ska is based on really playing on top of the beat, and especially the way we were playing the hype ska, we weren't going to slow down. If anything, we were going to speed up. So it was always a matter of the beginning of trying to find that point where the ska and the jazz could come together. The horns could play with a slight jazz inflection over the straight beat of the rhythm section. So that was a challenge at the beginning. Now we seem to have mastered it. But at the beginning, it was really a matter of where are you going to put it.
That one for me is like one of those. It was one of those marathons. You know, it's just like, see you at the end of this, man. Because I'm going in. You know, I'm just gonna try and breathe and stay there and hang on. Oh God, breathe.
I always like to get a little flute in on the records. I love to play flute. You know, it's sometimes hard to mic it properly live. I wanted to add some reggae on this one, and this one was eventually picked to be used for Campbell's Soup commercial.
Moby Dick, that's one of my favorite tunes by Freddie. I like that one a lot. It's a different vein from how he usually writes. You know, like I said, he likes to do these really aggressive, in your face, jump up tunes, and this one's much more laid back and kind of this early reggae / rock steady instrumental vibe, which I like a lot. The trombone and flute combination is really nice, and then we had Jack Ruby from the Toasters come in and do his thing over the top of a part of it, which was a nice element. And that's also another thing that I think sets this album apart is Ruby's contributions and that whole Jamaican dancehall thing.
I was reading Moby Dick at the time, and just came up with some lyrics that I threw at him that he kind of molded in his own little way, and it got picked for the Campbell Soup commercial, so it was great. It was on national television for like 6 months.
Hey Michael, can you make some chicken noodles?
Sure. You always knew Campbell's was good.
Today?
You just didn't know how good. Introducing Campbell's ready-to-serve soups. Now 7 of your favorites like classic chicken noodle and classic tomato come ready to eat.
Need some water?
Nah. Just microwave and eat. It's that easy.
Wanna try some tomato?
Campbell's. Good.
What I always said about that stuff, it was great to get the opportunity to do work like that. Obviously, you're getting paid. It's fun work for me. It's fun work for the band. I was happy that I was able to get the band in on the session, because sometimes these things are so sort of entrenched. They want to pick all their own musicians, and I was, it was great that I could get the band in on it. At that point, we were getting to be a pretty well-known band. We were building our fan base. But what I always tell people, in one commercial, we're being heard by more people than all the gigs that we had done conglomerately. Unfortunately, no one knew it was us, which is sort of the fate of studio musicians or commercial musicians. They're playing this commercial. It was on a major run. It was like on channels 2, 4, 7, all over the country. So, for about 6 months, you turn on the television and hear yourself. It was definitely a thrill.
That one is that's one that the song predated the band. It seems like every one of the records had one of my older tunes on it. Elegy was on the first record, and then it was Professor Bebop on the second one. And And Morningside is this little calypso ditty I'd written, back around 1990, I think. And Ed played it. There was a band I used to play with back home in Virginia with this band jazz quintet called Pendulum. With the main claim to fame is that the drummer was Carter Beauford and the sax player was Leroy Moore from the Dave Matthews Band. They were, old buddies of mine back before they were the Dave Matthews Band, and it had kind of been kicking around in my repertoire. And so I thought, well, this could be something different we could do. This, stay in the Caribbean but not go Jamaican for this one. And the other thing that made that track really work was that Carrie had played in Boston with a steel pan group for a while. A guy named Mackie Burnett, I think the guy's name was, and that was where he met Lloyd Knibb and got into doing the Skatalites. Was in that group, and so Carrie had that experience. So when we came in, we did this song, and he came back in. You'll notice on the record he's credited for playing keyboards, vocals, and break drums. And he came into the studio with 2 or 3 different car brake drums and some metal mallets of some kind, and put down that really carnival metal percussion thing, just cranking it out underneath what Jonathan was doing on the drums. And the other thing I love about that track is Carrie's solo. He plays on this really old analog synth, and I don't remember if he brought it in or if it was one that Joe had lying around the studio, but it was like some really primitive analog thing, but it had this really cool retro sound that seemed to fit the tune really well. So I that's one of my favorite moments on the record. And I remember that session because my parents were actually in the studio that day for some reason. I don't know, they were visiting, and that was the one time I brought them was they came in and got to see Carrie Brown play brake drums on Morningside. The only thing that was added, I guess, for this recording that wasn't in the original song was that shout chorus that Freddie and I played, a little sort of line towards the end after the solos, and I wrote that out specifically for this band's arrangement. We lived in Morningside Heights. That was where I got the name.
Some of those songs we were writing together as a team for this venture with Kablam and Nickelodeon, where they needed a theme song for Kablam.
Big up the masses!
Assume the crash position. Hold on tight. Take a deep breath for a new kind of cartoon show.
Freddie, Carrie, Jonathan, and Victor, and Buck. And so it was like four of the Ska-Jazz guys and then Buck, and each one of them brought in some material.
I think I brought in 3, if not 4, different ideas, which all finally found their way into becoming compositions and other things. It really didn't have so much. The only thing I had written out was sort of an organ line for Carrie to play, and the beat and the bass line, and sort of the harmony, but I had no substance. I had the whole build up to the moment where there should be something special, and that's where Jonathan started singing. And I was like, oh man, you got this now. Thank you. Now it's a song. Thank you.
We've been playing a Devon song called Wind and Water on the road a lot, and we never recorded it because the Skatalites had done it, but we used to do it in live shows, and I wish that had gotten documented somewhere because that was a fun tune to play. But Devon brought in this song called Butter. Well, actually, Jonathan named it. Devon didn't have a name for it when he brought it in. It's this E-flat minor reggae tune, and it's really nice. And Butter was Jonathan's nickname for Devon because he said he was always smooth like butter. So that was where the title came from.
It's really also the guitar and the bass are doubling up, so that sets up the whole groove and the vibe.
It's got killer solo by Devlin on this one, and he always loved playing with us because we let him stretch out and play as much as he wanted to. And in the Scatolites, he didn't get that many solos, so he told us that he always liked that about, that was one of the reasons he liked doing us and why he made time to do it. It's a really nice tune. I think Devlin's a very underrated composer, and I wish we'd gotten to do more of his stuff. But this was kind of the last hurrah for the original lineup of the band, at least in terms of the studio. So at least we got this one down. I was sort of going for the vibe of some of those Lee Morgan tunes that he recorded for Blue Note in the 60s, as that hard bop thing, which we were kind of mining in terms of some of the song choices, like Filthy McNasty, and we had on the previous record we'd had Jive Samba by Cannonball Adderley Quintet. So this was kind of the trying to go for that same vein with an original, that really hard bop bluesy feel. But then the twist in it a little bit is that the bass line is more inspired by Latin music. It has this kind of across the bar line, emphasis on beat 4 instead of beat 1 that comes. That's my other big love is Cuban music and salsa, and so those things always slipped into my tunes here and there. On the first record, Don Toho was an example of that, and so I was always finding ways of slipping bits of that into what I was writing for in the ska vein.
The really interesting thing about this song was that a couple years ago, a fan wrote to me and said, "Hey, Freddie, are you aware that this politician Arenas from Chile is using, your song in his commercial?" Lo and behold, they sent me the link, and there it is. This guy just stole the song.
¿Nosotros qué tenemos? Tenemos al mejor defensa del mundo. El único que defiende la reforma tributaria. Nos vamos a meter en medio de autogolazo. ¿Me entendí?
La reforma tributaria es un partido que tenemos que ganar todos los chilenos. La actual reforma está mal diseñada. Afectará a las pymes, a la clase media, al ahorro y al empleo. Estamos a tiempo. Hagamos las cosas bien por Chile.
We were discussing ways to go after it, and then it turned out ultimately that we even had a kid down there who hooked us up with a lawyer who was willing to take it on. He was going to pay the front charges and they were going to do it on spec for the rest, but the process of getting them authorization to act was so complicated that I had to say, look, I just can't do this. In a perfect world, I would love to nail that guy to the wall, because I may still report it to BMI, but yeah, I do not want my stuff associated with this guy.
What can you say? Duke Ellington, seminal figure in jazz, known for playing at the Cotton Club in New York City. Just, slow tempo song for us, featuring the horns, featuring Rick's trombone on the melody, on the A section.
But we had such a great success doing Naima on the last record that I thought Mood Indigo would kind of go in that same vein, jazz ballad-ish thing with a reggae feel underneath. It comes out a little more, I think, rock steady than Lovers Rock in terms of what we did with Naima. But it's a nice arrangement. We for the alto and trombone, and I sort of paraphrase the original clarinet solo in my solo.
It's kind of a standard Leroy Sibbles, rolling bass line from the 60s, early 70s. And that just made it so perfect. It's such a delicate tune, right? But it you put it on top of Jamaican rhythm and it's still delicate, but it's also resilient. You realize it's stronger than, it's not all that. It's delicate, but it's not fragile. You know what I mean? You can't break it.
Again, John was singing for us from behind the drums. I think he was getting more and more comfortable with it. Obviously, it's not the easiest thing, but a lot of people like Phil Collins or whoever, a lot of famous artists have done it. John was getting more used to it. He was writing. We always have sort of, I don't know if you would call it a pop element, just an element where we just want the audience to have fun and listen and dance, and it doesn't have to be anything more than that.
It's funny, I had completely forgotten this tune, and I was looking at the track list. I was like, "What is that?" I had completely forgotten, and then I listened to it. It's like, "Oh yeah, this was the first thing that Jonathan had written specifically for the band, and it definitely brings a different flavor to the band from anything that we'd done before. Jonathan was very much influenced by Stevie Wonder and Prince, and so the harmonic language is different from a lot of stuff we'd done, and it kind of opens up a different palette there. Another nice vocal feature for him. Tilt-A-Whirl, that is my favorite thing on this record. I have to say, it is undoubtedly the most demented ska composition that has ever been recorded, and I love it. It's such a wacky tune, from the introduction, which I didn't pick up on until he mentioned. It's basically a fractured version of Latin Go Ska, the introduction of Latin Go Ska, but like displaced by a couple beats and like twisted around a little bit, and then the melody, which is just this whole. It's very catchy, but it's weird at the same time, and it ends with a little quote from, I think, Hot House by Tad Dameron, and the chords are the hardest sequence to blow on of, I think, anything we ever did in that band. I loved that song. I loved playing it, but I hated taking solos on it because it was such a twisted harmonic progression and really hard, to keep up with, especially the style that I play in, where I like to skate across the chords more than run through them, and that you can't do that on that too. And the title is very apropos because it's like hard to keep the balance on this song. It's like always skating around somewhere you're not ready for.
Oh, my thoughts on Carrie as a composer were sealed with Blue Lunar Ska as possibly the most beautiful song that I have heard from those three records. That's, for me, that is just, devastatingly good, Now with Tilt-A-Whirl, he was looking to fuck some shit up. He didn't want just to make a beautiful song. He wanted us to work for it too. I feel like it was a personal affront from Carrie. It was like, resolve this, motherfucker. I got some changes for you, Basie. And for me, it was that. It was just the challenge of getting through that. I feel it's one of the very few bass solos I feel like I can listen to and not cringe, I never enjoyed bass solos, but I feel like that one, maybe it was just because of the complexity of the harmony that it was just easier to walk through it. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know why I felt less pressure on me to get that right. And so I do feel like that was probably one of my more melodic solos.
Again, Kaz had done such a great job for us on the other records. We wanted to continue with her. This song it's got the blues element, it's got the sort of the sad, crying kind of vibe.
Kaz, I think we stretched her with this. Like she had to follow on Billie Holiday, which is a hard act to follow. I really like how that track came out. It's this really laid back swing ska vibe. I don't know if I can think of another track that has quite that same feel, and has a nice vibe. I like Freddie's playing. I like my solo on that, which is not something I always say. So it's and Kaz, of course, sings it great. So I think we used the Billie Holiday recording as sort of a reference, but then kind of built it from there.
Don't try.
Agenda was something I wrote. I was inspired by a collection of Hungarian folk music that was like a 10-disc collection vinyl box of vinyl. Really fantastic thing, and as I said, I'm a fan of Bela Bartok, and I'm really, I think my understanding of Bartok's work and how he drew on folk music was a really big inspiration for me into thinking that I could make modern compositions with in a ska genre, because I felt like there was something very similar to what was going on in Eastern Europe and late 19th century and what was going on in Jamaica in the 60s. And not that one went from one place to the other, but just that to me, that was what world music is. When a certain rhythm surfaces in two places, three different places on the planet, at various times, but it's the same rhythm. So along the way, I'm listening to this folk recording, this Hungarian a cappella song, and I wrote it down. I really thought it was beautiful. And then I had a rhythm, a ska rhythm that I intended to use for another song, but I decided against it because it was a cover. I started creating a rhythm for a ska rhythm for David Crosby's song, Guinevere. But along the way, I was so, just stay away from covers. It's probably a good idea, just do your own thing. So I put it on ice. But when this melody came to me, I wrote it down. I realized I just had to conform it to a 4/4, and it would work very well with this rhythm that I had recorded already at Stubborn Records. But the cool thing with the Ska-Jazz was I didn't have to explain any of this, or, it's so great when you work with like literate musicians that can just read anything off the page, and you don't have to, all you have to worry about is if you wrote it down right or not. So I go into rehearsal and these guys nail it, from the jump, and it became something we enjoyed playing in Europe, and actually it was something we could feel that people were feeling in the East, and in Prague and in Budapest. We could feel that it was resonating. It was so distinctively Hungarian that it was really easy for people to get into,
This one was always a crowd favorite. I remember playing it at the festival on the Et in Geneva and just rocking the crowd. At one point in that open section, I start like dancing a lot and jumping up and down, and it's just a great tune to just stretch out on.
And I'm listening to Vada for the first time probably in 10 years or so, and it's killing me. It's like such an easy song to hear and to remember and to whistle. But if you're the bass player, you are screwed, because once again, it was written by Devon James, and he just had, he's got this agility. Those things are difficult to do on the guitar. So then he writes a really cool bass line on the guitar, and now I have to play it on the bass. And I was like, I don't think I can really get this the way you want it to sound on the bass. I mean, it's a guitar line, And he just looked at me and said, if you want, I can play it. And I was like, okay, I'll play the bass line. I'll play the bass line, I'll figure it out, pride came up and stuff. He knew what he was doing. He was laughing. So he knew he only had to threaten me with taking my job. And I learned my shit.
Ruby, was chatting on this one on the record version, and just really, I think he hits the nail on the head on this one. It's just a nice meld of the chatting over the instrumentals. Well, the thing was that I knew Jack from playing in the Toasters. He was a friend of mine. He had a really magnanimous personality. He was great on stage. He would get the crowd involved.
His dad was a heavyweight Jamaican record producer. I think his best known work that people would know now is the Burning Spear Marcus Garvey album. But he did a lot of things. He turns up in a couple of different reggae documentaries. I know there's one, the name escapes me now, but there's a scene of a vocal trio with a guitar auditioning in somebody's yard, and to the producer and sitting back in his hammock, and that's Ruby's dad.
He has like an incredible heritage of coming from the ska. So it was nice to, for us to get him in on the record. It just makes us feel like we connect more to Jamaica anyway. We added Nathan Breedlove on the trumpet. We always wanted to have some trumpet on these records. We decided to just change who the guests would be. Nathan was playing with the Ska-Lights at the time. He's really coming from a jazz perspective. Still friends with him. He's still playing a lot of jazz. And I remember like one of his takes, he just did it on his first take, which was very much kind of like this jazz mentality of like you just feel it. Sometimes people in the studio feel like their first take is the best take because it's very intuitive, if you will. It's like a visceral approach. You just, instead of trying to overanalyze things and try to overthink it, you just play it and feel it, and that's what it is.
We knew today because he was playing with the Ska-Lights. I think, Kerry kind of was our contact with him. Yeah, he blows really nice on there, and he has, he spent a lot of time in Ska-Lights, so he fit right in terms of the concept.
Agent J, another figure on the ska scene here. He's playing with the Slackers now. Back in the day, he did a tour with us, and I think we were doing some sort of surf guitar thing, and he just had that up his sleeve, and he surf guitared out. Mike Quarles, my guy, I've been using him on all the records. He had been playing with me with Stanley Jordan, so we had a long history. I liked having the percussion on the record just to spice things up, and Mike did a nice job. I think at this point, we were working with Moon Records, and we got some of the artists. The artists came through Moon, and we wanted to stay with the same concept. We were still pretty much on the horns, New York, and Get This was a little aggressive, but we were feeling really strong about what we were doing, and we felt like the message was get this, like, do you get it? And get this, come on, like, support us.
The cover of the album, that's the piano at Studio 900 with our instruments leaning against it. And there's actually a press photo from the same time of us all sitting around that same piano with all six of us in the instruments.
I think at this point too, it was clear that it was the New York Ska-Jazz Ensemble, and what made it so special were the band members. So we had never really given it up to everybody to have, single portraits. That was the original band. So, I think the seedling of this whole project, part of what made it so special were these individuals, and you can never forget that. So, it was just a way to kind of give respect to the band members. We've had the same booking agent in Italy from the beginning, Alex Fabro. He works with Hub Music Factory. It's a major booking agency in Italy. But I always say it's great to have really good booking agents, smart people who you can trust, who are trying to get your really quality work, who are professionals. It's hard to find those guys, and when you do, you want to hold on to them and just create a relationship, which thank goodness I have done over all these years. At that time, the scene, there were so many bands. I was playing with a band called One Groovy Coconut, my boy Craig Santiago. The lead singer was Joey. We did a couple of records with them. Buford from the Scofflaws at the time, he and I were doing those records. I think Tony Calarco maybe played on one of those records. Great records. We might have recorded it at Coyote Studios, and I was just also playing gigs with those guys, so I probably gave it up to them on the liner notes just because everybody was helping, giving me work, so they were part of the whole fabric. Barney. Okay, well, one of the ways that we were touring back in the day was Bucket had hooked up a driver named Barney. He had what was called the Barney bus. It was really a van, and it was this driver from England who would come and drive for us.
That time we had this guy named Barney, British guy, who was our merchandiser and driver, and we were driving one of those, I guess they call them Sprinter vans now, this sort of European tour special that we had in those days. And Barney was this crazy, old, balding, long-haired English dude. He was a piece of work. Barney would, something that somebody pointed out to me, which always made me nervous, is that Barney would drive through the night, and somebody said, watch him. If you ever see him with his fist up over his head like this, that means he's afraid he's going to fall asleep. And he's then the idea being that if he fell asleep, he'd punch himself in the head and wake himself up. So, anyway,
We had gotten a show at the North Sea Jazz Festival. This was and is one of the most preeminent jazz festivals on the continent. They say it's like the second biggest. It was a big deal. You know, all my life I've been wanting to get these big jazz festivals, especially as the band leader. You know, it's a thrill. But this particular day, the commute to the show was like 7 or 9 hours, and you know, it was getting later in the day. We were only about 2 hours away, but stage time was maybe like 4 hours. So it was getting tight, but we were going to make it.
So we were driving and we crossed the border over into Holland and stopped at a rest stop. Now Barney, this is pre-Euro, he had this huge wallet that had like all the different currencies for all the different countries we were traveling in, and big fat leather thing, and he kept it in a holster on the side of his belt. We're driving along about 45 minutes later, and suddenly like 6 cop cars came up and sort of did a phalanx around us, pulled us over into this rest area. We were like, what is going on? And what's this about? And then Carrie Brown or so, I said, you know, they've got guns, guys. What, you know, it was like, we realized it was pretty serious. And so, you know, they said, you know, they stay in the van.
They make us stop the van. They tell Barney, the driver at the time, to get out of the van. His exact words, I will not.
And somebody, Jonathan or Carrie or somebody said, Barney, they got guns. Do what they say.
He gets out of the van. It was raining. They make him get on his knees. He was like fighting them all every step of the way. And we're like, Barney, please do this. They put him down on his knees, handcuff him behind his back. We had no idea what was going on. And then one by one, they took all of the band members and our booking agent, Thomas Schultz, took us out of the van, put us all on the ground in handcuffs behind the van in the pouring rain. And we were just behind the van completely at a loss as to what was going on. They took Barney away and drove him away. And I thought at the time it would have been a perfect record cover to have us all, you know, in handcuffs on the ground on our knees.
Jonathan's like, man, I made it to, I was 26 years old as a black man in America, never been handcuffed, and this has to happen here. Carrie's like, excuse me, could I please get up? And like, no. And then he wouldn't let it go. It's like, Carrie, this is not a time to be trying to push the boundaries on this.
What ended up happening, they finally uncuffed us, and we finally figured out that the reason why this all occurred was that Barney used to wear a belt around his waist, and it was where he actually kept his money. It was his money belt. Well, someone at the rest stop where we had stopped thought they saw a gun and thought he was carrying a gun, which of course he was not. Barney shows up in the nick of time. We pile back into the van. We drive straight to the stage. We were actually playing with Cubanismo, which was a great band, salsa band from Cuba. And I just remember kind of briefly telling the audience what had happened to us. And I said to them, do we look like criminals? And of course, everybody starts clapping and cheering and saying, yes, of course we do. Okay, my boy Richie used to roadie for me when I was playing with some local bands here on Long Island. He's still involved in the music business these days. The funny story with Richie is that he's the only person who's ever taken a punch for the Ska-Jazz. We were playing at the House of Blues in LA. You know, this particular night, it just seemed to be kind of like a crazy uptight night. There was some kid in the audience, skinhead, who was like, you know, kind of like dancing and knocking all the girls and just being a real dick. So eventually at that point, Shay was our manager. He was out there with us. He got the club to throw this guy out of the club because, you know, we don't want people like hurting other people while they're, you know, taking in our show. We're about peace and love and, you know, unity. So we don't really want people, you know, trying to kick each other's asses. Well, it turns out we had a great show after that. It was a really fun night. And after it was all over, we went up to the green room to get our party on. And Richie, the roadie, my buddy, was with us. And he went out back to go clean up, you know, to pack up the stuff. And apparently while he was in our vehicle packing up the stuff, a skinhead kid had come over and smacked a beer bottle on our van. And Richie, who happens to be a black belt, came out of the van saying, yo, what's up? And this kid starts running full speed at him. Well, the kid, of course, doesn't know that Richie's a black belt. So before you know it, the kid runs, and Richie, because he just puts his leg up and, you know, basically knocks the guy out. because he runs, the kid runs right into Richie's leg and his neck. But after this occurs, 6 or 7 of his friends descend on Richie, and they all start trying to beat him. And, he's only a little guy, but he's like a black belt. He really, he's a strong guy. He knows how to fight. But, 6-1 is not fair. He unfortunately did catch a boot to his head. As this is all occurring, apparently Carrie Brown, our keyboard player, saw it. They got one of the big guys at the door from the House of Blues and basically just picked Richie up out of this pack of skinhead guys and put him to safety. But he's the only one who's ever taken a punch for the Ska-Jazz. Matt Malice, the bass player from the Toasters, he's still involved in the music business, booking tours, running tours. He does the money these days. Back in the day, he was still playing with the Toasters, but he was branching out, and he started booking us into rooms like the New Frontier in New York, and he's been a friend all these years. My cousin Rennie hooked us up with the Campbell Soup commercial. He produces television commercials in LA, incredibly talented guy. He actually did our first video, which we did years later. Okay, Richie had some friends in Germany, Sven and his brother, and one of those early tours, they put us up. They had something called the Stammtisch, which was sort of like this gathering of local people, and they would have dinners. They put us up. We played for them, and they got us very drunk, and this was when I really started learning the virtues of Weiss beer.
I was thinking in terms of each record's distinctive character. One of the things that defines this album is that Freddie plays a lot of alto on this one, which he's never done on either of the previous two. Like, the first record is almost all tenor except for the one flute thing, and in the second album he's playing a lot of Barry mixed in there, which I think gives that album its character. And this one, I think the alto is kind of sort of a defining part of the sound that sets it apart.
Every one of these records is somewhat of a labor of love for me. I really live with them, and I spend a lot of time listening to the tracks over and over and over again. I have to say, honestly, that I really do love all the Ska-Jazz records, and I still can listen to them, and I think they're relevant. I think they speak for themselves. We're playing from our hearts. We're playing music that we feel and very passionately about. I really like this record. We're still performing songs live from the record. I particularly like Ruby's chatting on that Butter. And just all the guest artists we chose, they always add the little spice that gives it that little je ne sais quoi, that little extra, little nicety that makes it, a touch above.
I was happy with how it came out. All three of those first three albums I think are really good. And yeah, we did a lot of it live. I know Filthy McNasty was a live staple. We did Tilt-A-Whirl live quite a bit. That's on the live album too, which was my proof that we did. Butter was a common one. Mood Indigo. Yeah, a lot of those songs. Arachnid was, of course, another one. So a lot of those songs wound up in the live repertoire and kind of stayed for the next couple years.
When I have listened back to this thing, I am sometimes, like I said, I wish there were some things I was a little more mature about. But also I'm surprised by certain maturity on other tracks, and I'm surprised actually that I had any reserve at all when I think about what I was going through at the time. I was 30 years old, and New York was already became a difficult place for an artist to live, and people making life decisions based on real estate and based on rent prices, like where you're going to live is, that whole thing shapes people's lives, personalities. The conditions on my leaving had more to do with my growing importance in being in New York and not being on tour and not focusing on one group. That became an important decision to make in 1998. I made a clear decision very early when I was maybe 15 that I wanted to be a bass player in the studio, not on the stage. I wanted to be on records. And I thought that my time was better used in the studio because what you do there is forever. You place a million times. When you're playing the stage, you know, that's where it was, and that was gone. But not to mention the 24-hour cycle required to get to the stage. And I like to think that, wow, I walk down the street, I go down to Virgin City, and I could record a song there. It'll take me an hour, and it's forever. You know, theoretically, it's you know, that song will play an infinite amount of times. So I always valued the studio experience to the stage, and that's more than anything. That's what, you know, kept me in New York and kept me from being able to grow and move on with the Ska-Jazz. I guess the positive things that I brought with me from the Ska-Jazz are things like this respect for the written song, and this respect for being able to present your vision on a piece of paper, and knowing that if you got the right group of people, they'll realize it either the way you had imagined or better. And that's an amazing feeling, you know. And I've never had that kind of, even with my own band, I've never had such a crack team of musicians to play my tunes and just, you know, eat it up like candy, you know. That was, you know, that's a memory that I'll always remember. Every time I'm cracking in a band, anytime I'm cracking in a musician or something, I'll be like, you know, there were these guys in New York, man. You just threw the paper into the air, and before it landed on their stand, they already knew the changes, you know. It's like, you know, it made me impatient with the rest of the world. And I can say whenever like Cox and Dodd or Roland Alfonso or anybody from the Scatolites and anybody from the old guard was checking out Ska-Jazz, they really appreciated it. They could see how much we appreciated it. They could see that it was important to us, and you could see for them it was more than relief. It was kind of like a vindication, you know. And it's always great to see the old guard smiling. Yeah, we all want to see that.
I mean, the thing that's been great about the Ska-Jazz is I feel like the trajectory is still, you know, just going up even after all these years. You know, we had really asserted ourselves as like one of the heavyweights on the scene. We were considered an all-star band. This record, you know, was not a letdown. It was, you know, people really loved this record because things were going well, and I believed in it, and I loved doing it, and artistically it was quite satisfying, and we were making enough money to live, thank the Lord. It kept getting bigger and better.